from someone in the team that you can see the slides? All good?
Yes, I
Thanks.
can see the slides.
Thanks, Darren. I think, was that Darren or
No,
James?
that was Shepard.
That was Shapit. Shapit. Thank you. So we are here. It's November 11th. It's actually November 12th where I am in the future. And today, what our is to do is, first of all, we're going to have some relational time after we spend a moment or two getting clarity on how we actually arrived at this point. We'll have some relational time together. Then we'll go into a broad program overview that will have some similar information, but will also go into a lot more detail than what you might have seen on previous information sessions. And then we're going to dive into phase one and get really specifically into the format and structure, the content, the funding, and also the outputs that phase one has. We'll also go over the calendar and a little bit of an orientation to the Mighty Network space, and then we'll finish out with time for questions. And so, like I said, we've got 23 slides with a lot of information. We will be driving through. And so as questions come up, please feel free to pop those into the chat. And then if they're fairly straightforward to answer, Claire and Brandon, I invite you to put straightforward answers into the chat. If it's a more complex question, then we'll just note it in the chat and come back to it at the end of the presentation. So, where's my clicky thing? As we know, where did all of this start? Regenerate Cascadia was birthed to first and foremost create a whole systems approach to the work of land regeneration. Our challenge was how to coordinate across different scales within a very large bioregion like Cascadia in a coherent way. And our goal was to create a connected network of ecosystems, communities, and economies that are learning from each other and holding the work together. And so we started with the tour in October and November of 2023, and a really juicy question: what would it take to regenerate an entire bioregion? And much has happened since then. And so where are we? And you can access what has happened in the past. We've got a few recordings underneath the Bioregen program that will go over the history in more detail. But for now, a moment of celebration. We are now 9 Regenerate Cascadia landscape groups with, I think, 35 land stewards participating directly in the LHC. And you can see all the landscape groups here on the map. And the bigger picture, in fact, which we did just publish recently, this was a feedback diagram we came up with for some storytelling to promote back to Kinship Earth, who have contributed some funding to the Landscape Hub Cultivator. And this represents really the larger ecosystem that you are a part of and that you will be helping to steward and move forward. And so we've got Regenerate Cascadia here with our 7 team members as the mother tree. And you can see our 9 landscape groups around that tree and landscape stewards' names. We represent so far 3 ecoregions within Cascadia: Salish Sea, Columbia River, and Willamette Valley. You all represent within your landscape groups, there is a larger community of around 600 members that are part of the Regenerate Cascadia vision, and they represent approximately 150 regenerative groups, organizations, and businesses within Cascadia. And so where we are now is the Landscape Hub Cultivator is the next major step in our bioregen program to bring nourishment and resources and light to our 9 landscape group circles, with $80,000 that we have in the coffers to distribute to landscape groups as part of a learning process as we move through the 3 phases of the program. So we are now going to have a bit of a chance to have a chat and just get to know each other a bit better. I mean, you'll probably end up in a group with someone you know, someone you don't know, we'll see. But we're going to pop into breakout rooms for 10 minutes and have an intimate conversation. There'll be about 3 of you in there, maybe 2. You know, obviously introduce yourself, your name and your landscape group. And then 2 question prompts that are just there to sort of guide your discussions. what's your relationship with Regenerate Cascadia and what brings you to the work? So for some of you, you've been around since before this vision came to be. You were a critical part of helping shape the vision. For some of you, you've been attracted into the work because of its existence. So just sharing what brings you to the work now, what calls you to the land regeneration work that we're doing. And then specifically regarding the Landscape Hub Cultivator pilot, what are you most curious about, excited about, interested? What sort of questions do you have? What's top of mind for you as you come into this new program experience? And so, Brandon, how are you doing with the breakout rooms?
Yeah, give me just a minute. And so we'll
Great.
just take a
I'll just
moment
we'll
for a
take.
brief breath and a hello. And just it's very nice to see everybody. And thank you for bearing with us as we had a little kind of start fun. Can't always just have things flow. So, but it's wonderful to see everybody. Yeah, give me just a sec and I'll get these set up and open.
Okay, great. So what we're attempting to do in the background is actually match people with people that are from a different landscape group. And we're having like cross landscape group conversations. And we're also popping in the Regenerate Cascadia team into those conversations as well. So there's quite a bit of manual shaping of the rooms. And Brandon, if it gets too tricky, you could just go reassign automatic and we'll just go with how the universe presents itself. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Brandon, for managing the technology that allowed us to have some intimate relational space. We'll just go into we'll just go into a couple of minutes of just what I call popcorn style open dialogue. So anyone that feels called to share a little about what they said or what they heard someone else say in your group conversation, just to get a little bit of a read of the room. And so just jump in. You could just unmute yourself and jump in. You don't need to put your hand up or anything.
Well, I can jump in. I'm Dave Ketter up here in Bellingham, Regenerate Whatcom. And I just love the energy of being with Sue and Taya. And we popped in, at least one part, popped into the thought of relanguaging, how we speak about the earth and our relationship to it needs to get relanguaged, and transformational change and philosophical shifts that are going to be needed, but not just in our head, but in our hearts as well. And that was really fun to play with and feel the excitement of that with Taya and Sue.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? Hello, Asha.
I enjoyed, is someone talking? Oh, I enjoyed the like we all kind of talked about how we joined because these are our people. So it's fun to have that excitement.
Our ilk, our tribe. Thank you. Someone else?
Yeah, and similar in our group, there was this sense that the work that we've been doing is like, oh, other people are doing the same thing, like, wherever we got pulled from. We had similar thoughts, and also that the Regenerate Cascadia movement is doing the same work. So feeling supported in what we're doing, kind of maybe more feeling alone or like, not super not super supported, but then here's this whole region and group and even people we just met doing the same stuff. So thanks.
It's good. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'd like to bring a hurrah to Darren and Denise that I spoke with from the Duwamish, and Darren is from Victoria, and it was amazing because we all kind of came together very quickly with starting small with this group, yet how much we want to weave together the many wonderful things that are in alignment with this into the future of all the other people, and what the weaving, the metaphor for the weaving and the art came out of all of that. So it was very exciting and beneficial to talk with folks from other areas.
Wonderful. Got time for one or two more comments, shares?
Well, in our group, we also talked about weaving together with other groups that are doing similar things, and how can we learn from each other and coordinate. And Tom and I both have a background with the Transition Whatcom and Transition Whidbey groups. So, what can we learn? What can we bring forward of lessons learned from being involved in those types of groups?
Wonderful. So many opportunities. Oh, Brian, you're about to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there is a bit of discussion and just like, coming together under the umbrella of Regenerate Cascadia, like weaves together so many different passions and organizations, and it's kind of like the thin edge of the wedge that might be able to move things forward, and consolidate efforts in a positive way as networking other organizations, and then joining together with young and old energy, wisdom and youth and enthusiasm is so important to be able to do that, and through funding and other methods to bring the youth into it because they're passionate, but they don't have the means to be able to donate the time. And so really, like, what really speaks to me is like the ability to bring funding into this conversation that can bring youth and energy that people want to donate time and energy, but in this financial climate are not able to without support and resources.
we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us. I do love this thin edge of the wedge. See if we can weave that into some of our graphics. We really are on the precipice right now of diving into a very particular, I'm going to say exclusive part of the Regenerate Cascadia experiment, in that there'll be around 32 to 35 of us who are representing and bridging back out to our landscape groups and to our broader landscape communities, but are going to be going on that focused journey together. And it really is an unknown. So, and so we're going to dive in right now. We're going to start with a program overview. Then we'll go into our nuts and bolts, and then we'll circle back around for questions and to continue the dialogue that we're having right now, after we've given you a lot more information. So I'll go back to sharing screen. And Claire and Brandon, I forgot to say, at any point, jump in, with any extra points to add. So some of you, we wanted to start with the why, the big why behind the Landscape Hub Cultivator. And if some of you who have been in our earlier information sessions recently will have seen this diagram. And what this diagram shows is a sense of what the investment level and what the time frame would be if we were to really be able to build a regenerative economy that eventually can be proven out by a private sector who can take more risk, and therefore provide a model where governments can start to come into the fold as well. That's the longer term vision. If we think about the Paris Agreement and how countries have nationally determined contributions, the work that we're doing now could actually catalyze that unifying global structure, because it's missing right now. And so what this diagram shows us is something that we've taken on that we think is a really valid assumption to test, is that initially we need to really lean in and invest towards the development of core teams that can hold regenerative projects. And so in this instance, core team right now means landscape groups, yeah? And the Landscape Hub Cultivator will be a way to take that core team notion further, develop it further, so that we in our core teams are able to develop portfolios of regenerative projects in our landscapes that we call home, that are held together by a bioregional identity that Cascadia gives us, that can then ratchet up into an aggregate of larger projects. So the gist of it is that we're looking to build infrastructure, and by infrastructure that means social, ecological, economic, technical infrastructure that will support this work for at least 20 years, because that's the time scale we need if we're going to be affecting any sort of measurable change in the direction that we want to be going in. So we're not here, we don't want to be a flash in the pan is the point of this slide. And so how we've responded to that in regard to our programs is we've got our Cascadia Bioregion program, which holds the landscape groups developing into landscape hubs and is doing all of the work like bioregional mapping, developing regeneration strategies, and strengthening our capacities that can then sync in with bioregional finance, which is helping to develop local, regional, and bioregional funding ecosystems. Because if we don't find a way to get resources to flow to this 20-year plus infrastructure, it won't continue to exist in the way that we need it to. And so the Landscape Hub Cultivator, even though it sits in our bioregion program, is really the bridge between our bioregional regeneration organizing and how we attract finance based on the strength of what it is that we're doing and producing together. And so the Landscape Hub Cultivator, in its essence, exists to create the conditions for the emergence of Cascadia landscape hubs, which is the next level up in terms of infrastructure that we're envisioning beyond landscape groups. Oh, how did that happen? Oh yeah, okay, I've jumped ahead. So why the LHC? We really designed the form of the LHC from the functions that we were looking for. First of all, it's infrastructure that focuses on the bottom scaffolding, so teams and regenerative project portfolios, but it has the capacity to interface with those broader horizons of economy and government, hopefully sooner rather than later. And that's one of the things we'll be testing as we go through this first year. And finally, and this is probably the thing that we're the most excited about, is it is a scaling mechanism. We're working with 9 landscapes in parallel as we move through this. And so by the end of our year-long journey together, we will have a really good sense of what works and what doesn't work at the landscape group level, but also how that can happen at the same time across multiple landscapes, which is so important right now that we can move at that scale. So this isn't fully cooked, it's not fully baked vision, but we thought it would be good to just paint the broader picture. And so if you move over up here into the left, top left, you see 3 circles, and the middle green circle is landscape group. We've successfully launched the landscape group part of the program. We now have 9 landscape groups connected with Regenerate Cascadia. And each of you are landscape stewards inside of that landscape group. And your landscape groups maybe already or certainly in the future will be interacting with a larger landscape community. And so the LHC is the next step, and it's the bridge from where we are now to where we need to be to actually have a bioregional strategy and a funding ecosystem that a regeneration fund can support. So the LHC sits here in the middle. Step 1 is for landscape stewards to participate in the LHC and then bridge that experience back to the wider landscape as they move along. Step 2, in the second half of the LHC, we'll be focusing on developing what we're loosely calling land regeneration teams. And that may be the stewards we have currently in the room. It might be other people, different people, a mix. You'll have plenty of time to work those types of things out as we move along. But those LRTs are a specific confluence of a core team that is willing to help do the next couple of years of work to bridge into becoming a fully fledged hub if they desire. And so the third step is for landscape group communities and their core teams to engage in the bioregional regeneration framework that we all come up with together. And so to the right, this big circle is, is the vision of what could happen, where we have multiple hubs that are connecting and coordinating multiple landscape groups that are within their ecoregion. And potentially we have landscape groups that don't yet have a hub, but eventually there's enough of them where 2 of them decide to join, a hub's created. That's all in the future. We don't know what it's going to look like. But this is just to give you an example of the thinking behind the LHC structure and form. Brandon and Claire, anything to... all good? Cool. So what are the goals? These are not in any way exhaustive, but we wanted to start with the broad, longer term goals, which are in some ways our values and principles. The first one is to be clear that we are trying to do things differently. We're looking to interrupt existing systemic patterns, to create a cultural shift. We're learning to navigate right relationship to the land is our central guiding principle. The land leads. As part of that, valuing and nurturing networks of relationships as being the critical glue that holds the work, that building and holding trust is what holds this level of collaborative work. That we're developing and practicing new old forms of coordinating, collaborating, and participatory governance that's going to be essential for nested scale levels of bioregional organizing. And finally, that we're developing the bioregional infrastructure required to attract and flow funding to where it is needed in Cascadia. And I mentioned before, what is bioregional infrastructure? It's going to be a lot of things. It's definitely social infrastructure, technical, economic, ecological. We'll see. That's something that we'll discover together as we move forward. But to get a little bit more specific, some shorter term goals, and this is going to be some new information that we haven't presented before. One of the overarching outputs that we're looking for from the LHC pilot is to take the theoretical components of bioregional finance into practice to ascertain their feasibility and to help advance the field. So right now, bioregional finance is a very, very new emerging field. Samantha Power has written an amazing book that has some ideas, it's got some examples, it's got case studies, it's got some templates. But it's only being put to the test in very isolated pockets. We really want to take that a lot further, and we want to test quite a few different templates to see what actually works in regard to sustainable biofi. So within that, bioregional finance, so money flowing into landscapes, we want to learn what is needed at practical, relational, and strategic levels for the effective disbursement and stewardship of bioregional finance. When money comes into the picture, it can do a lot of things, and often they're not positive. So, you know, groups that receive too much money too early before they've formed their relationships and built coherence can have that funding flow become difficult. Groups that are not receiving enough money, groups that have been marginalized and have systemically not received the funds that they should be getting access to. All these issues are part of bioregional finance, and we want to learn together how to flesh some of those out. Also, we want to catalyze landscape level learning and development in parallel. We've said that before, within multiple landscapes and multiple ecoregions at the same time. We know that we need a scaling mechanism so that we can work quickly. Well, I shouldn't say quickly, so that we can work broadly. So within the landscape level learning, here are some of the specific goals. We want to be uncovering stories of place and strengthening a sense of a shared landscape context that flows into a shared bioregional lens. We definitely want to flow funding to a portfolio of local landscape projects, and we have $80,000 earmarked for that now, and we have hopes of bringing in more as we move through the pilot. We want to catalyze what we're calling landscape regeneration teams, some sort of core team function to hold the longer journey toward landscape hub development, because we don't think at this stage it can be done just in this first year. Who knows? We'll see. And then we want to support these teams with essential skills and tools to foster community cultural development and support essential operational functions. So again, we're seeing here, it's not just about project portfolios, it's not just about budgets and strategies, it's also about the community cultural shifts that we're making. Very important, we want to continuously learn from each other and from the different landscapes themselves. It's so great to have 9 landscape groups, including one from Canada, Greater Victoria, so that we could have the most diverse learning. We want to publicly share our LHC learning journey together, and we're going to be kicking that off in phase 1. We think it's really important to shine a spotlight on this cultivator from the get-go, because that's what's going to potentially bring in more funding and more opportunities as we move through the 12 months together. And finally, I'm just going to move a thing on my screen. We want to refine the template for the LHC in its pilot year so that we can secure funding for at least 2 more years and start to run this program on an annual basis to gather some momentum and some steam. Claire, Brandon, want to jump in? That's a no. Okay.
This is great. I just wanted to say there's some stuff coming up in the chat that I just wanted to address that's sort of in relation to what you were saying, but it was from Anna Prouty and talking about the people that self-select themselves into the organizing aren't always the people that are connected into the community. And so there are various processes we'll be going through, including the bioregional mapping process, where you will start, those are intended to be participatory processes. And that's where, you know, what trust is such an important part of doing this work. And the people that are able to be those relational weavers in an effective way start to become really obvious. And so people play different roles. All I wanted to do was really address what is an excellent point that Anna's bringing up. And just to say, absolutely, that's a really important consideration. Yeah.
Thanks,
And
Claire.
we've got lots more to say about that later on. Yeah.
All right, we'll jump back in. Okay, so slideshow mode. So we wanted to get clear. We wanted to clarify expectations as we jump into this journey together about what the LHC is and what it's not, as another lens through which to get to know what it is that we're planning on doing here. The first one, it is definitely an active experiment in bioregional organizing and systems transformation. We are prototyping together. It is potentially a world first prototype. We have not seen this scale of collaboration across such a large bioregion yet. And so we are prototyping something pretty evolutionary. It is definitely highly emergent. You've probably already had a sense of that as you've watched us get the Mighty Network platform up and start to get these first steps in place. We have a pretty good idea of what phase 1 looks like. We've got some good plans for phase 2, but rightly so, phase 3, we just can't know where we're going to be in 6 months. And so we really want you to know that this is 100% a co-creation amongst all of us. And where we will be quite rigorous is we're going to have like, 3-ish weeks off between each phase where we can just let go, we can do our evaluation and our co-learning together, and it gives us time to iterate and integrate that into the next phase. So we're really co-creating together. It is an incubator. It is a live learning laboratory and a capacity builder. And I think that speaks to its pace. Yes, we're going to have deadlines and targets, and yes, it's a year long, but we will acknowledge the time it takes to do the work because we don't yet know what that is. It is definitely dispersing money to landscape groups within sandbox learning conditions, which I think is so important because it means we can start to get a sense of what do we need to learn by when in order to continue to increase our coordinating and disbursement and stewardship role when it comes to money and other resources. We are definitely testing a series of assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions built into the emerging field of biofi, and we want to test some of them so that we can come out of that and be able to say to funders like Novo, yes, that assumption is valid. No, that assumption is not valid, so that we can start to really strengthen our knowledge of the field. And something that we say all the time, and we want to bring you into our internal language, is that it is an MVP. And by that, we mean minimal viable process. So what is the minimum amount of exploring together that we need to do to get a sense of whether a particular assumption works or not? Like the assumption that we need core landscape teams to develop a hub. That's an assumption. We don't know if it's true, but we'll find out. And the other thing that the MVP concept helps us do is really manage the restricted or the minimal resources and capacity that we currently have, because we're still doing this sort of on this with not a whole lot of funds. So that brings us to what the LHC is not. It is not Claire, go.
I'm just going to jump on that. Was that we talked about trust being such an important part of what we're doing here, and there is a risk of trying to do, all of the people that need to be involved in this, and there's also that, as Taya was saying, the capacity issues. And so when we put trust building and building at the speed of trust at the heart of that, it means that we can also let go of any expectations of trying to do what we think we should be doing, and we should do it at the right pace. So yeah, really, we'll be coming back to that over and over again, because we're laying foundations and we want them to be good foundations.
And we don't want to get overwhelmed. This work is very attractive. It's magnetic, and before you know it, you're trying to do too many things, and you've lost sort of essential strategic focus. Which for us, why is that important? Because it helps us bring in larger and larger amounts of funding, if we can consistently show that we're making progress. And so what the LHC is not, it's not an accelerator. Like, obviously long term we hope to accelerate bioregional land regeneration, but not through an accelerated process. We will be slowing down where we need to and adjusting whatever our thoughts around structure and format were, so that we truly can incubate and learn together. The LHC is not an expert domain. So Claire, Brandon, and myself think of ourselves as deep generalists. We're not the subject matter experts on this. We're a bioregional organizing team just like you, and we're here to cook and co-create together. It is not linear. It looks linear. It's got 3 phases and 12 months and 3 disbursements, but it is not a linear learning journey. We predict we'll be circling back here and there many times over. We will not be going deep into each aspect. This relates back to the MVP. We want to touch on and test and try certain things so that we can iterate and move forward and start to go deeper in the next round of work. The LHC is not currently well resourced. All of us are working within a part-time capacity. We have our budget for this year, and as you know, it's 80,000 in terms of disbursements to the groups. Our goal is to grow this. It's also not secure in terms of ongoing funding. We're funded for till end of May, I think. And then in June, a new funding cycle kicks off. In phase one, some of our outputs will be critical to our grant submission to help secure more funds. And we just want to be really honest with you that we're not there yet. We haven't secured this for the next 2 or 3 years. We've got enough to get going, and we'll see how we go. Anything to add there, Brandon or Claire, or all good? All good, cool. So pathway, stepping stones, what are the foundations? How are we going to do this? What are the key components? The foundations throughout the LHC is that communities are stepping into sovereignty as stewards of their place, the places where we live, where we're close to nature and can sense how the land is asking us to lead. That we are inclusive. We're inclusive in our stewardship, and we put a lot of thought into representation and consent, and that happens consistently throughout the whole program and all of its activities. And that we are also encouraging self-organizing for landscape resilience. We don't want to lock all of these 9 groups in. There isn't one way. We've got some templates to test and try, but self-organization should still be hopefully flourishing and promoted. So some of the key components that the phases will be taking us through initially are landscape stories and a landscape showcase event to make the work visible. We want to get that spotlight on what we're doing sooner rather than later. Bioregional mapping as one tool, and layers of stewardship as another tool, which helps us give, well, I'll talk about that in a moment. A portfolio of regenerative projects, just an initial one. It doesn't need to be everything, but that we start to group together projects that make sense. The creation of a landscape strategy and a budget for each landscape group. Again, it's initial strategy and budget. It's a starting point. Landscape core team development, that we start to play in that field together. And what the layers of stewardship help give to us, which is so important for BioFi, is community identified indicators of what positive impact looks like in your landscapes, and therefore what it is that you want to monitor, report, and verify in terms of impact. That's what MRV stands for. Why is that important? When it comes to funding and funders currently in our existing systems, there's a need to show impact in a certain way, and a lot of projects get derailed here because the funders only want to see impact from the perspective of carbon sequestered, and it's just not enough, and it doesn't capture the multi-capital value streams that we know are inherent in the work. So this is actually a really, really important one. And finally, all of this is being held together through mentorship, co-learning within our community of practice in Mighty Networks, and of course during our face-to-face and online sessions. So all of what I've just said and more detail is mapped out in these 3 phases, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here because this is already been posted in Mighty Networks and you can read it yourself. But we have our phases mapped out. We'll be concluding phase 1, which is preparing the foundations for money to flow and for us to go public. We'll conclude in the first week of February. From a funding perspective, we have at least 1,500 that will go to each landscape group to support the activities. And it's possible that if we're successful in the localism fund, that could even be as much as 3,000 per landscape group. So money is going to be flowing to your landscape groups within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Phase 2, but I'm going to go into phase 1 details more, so I won't unpack that now. Phase 2 is where we're looking at our bioregional mapping tools and our flow funding pilots, and that will take us through from March till June. This is where we have $3,500 per landscape group allocated to support you in the bioregional mapping workshops, which will be face-to-face in your communities. And then another $3,000 that's going to be an active flow funding sandbox experiment. And maybe we'll raise more by then, we'll see. And then post June 2026, we'll then know whether we have received further funds from Novo. We will have had some time to get further along in the design, and by then all of us will have helped to co-create what the next 6 months looks like. Anything else, Claire, Brandon? All good? Okay. Okay. So gear change, that was the program overview holistically. Just letting you know, I can't monitor the chat, but Claire and Brandon are, and we're moving at a pace so that we can have dialogue time at the end, which tends to always get eaten up. So hang in there. We're now going to dive into the phase 1 details because this is what's right in front of us. So from a format and a structure perspective, this is the format that we'll test and try in phase 1. We'll see how it works and we can iterate and tweak it for phase 2. So in the 3 phases, each phase is made up of monthly blocks that feature a monthly content session, e.g. phase 1, session 2 is communicating vision and impact, multi-capital and story-based reporting. The content sessions will always happen on Fridays from 10:30 to 12. 2 to 3 weekly classroom sessions that support whatever the content was and helps us actually work through the activities and the process guides, e.g. phase 1, classroom 1 from session 2. And those will always happen on Tuesdays. So the 9 landscape groups participating in the LHC will be allocated to either a morning or an evening classroom on Tuesdays, depending on your group's preference. So when we did an availability poll, we only had, maybe 10 people respond, but mornings were very much a preference, followed by evenings. And so we're offering classrooms at both of those times. What we don't want is for it to just be a show up like free for all. We actually want to divide the 9 groups into a morning and an evening cohort, at least for phase 1, so that we know who we're working with and we know that we have good coverage in terms of being split down the middle. So if I know that we don't have all of our landscape stewards here, if it's easy for you right now in the chat box, just to pop in your group name and a preference for AM or PM, or if you don't have a preference, that's helpful. After this session, like in the next few days, I'll post and specifically ask people, I'll give a sense of what's come up here, and I'll specifically ask landscape groups to confirm their preferences. And then the content sessions will introduce the focus for each month of each phase, i.e. what the classrooms will cover. So for instance, session 2, which is happening in December, is about communicating vision and impact. And so our classrooms are very much geared towards the production of the story deck templates. So we'll have a first session to gather everyone's inputs around how they see their multi-capital value and what they would like to see represented in their story deck templates. Then from there, we'll build the template so that it's not top down, it's come from all of us. Classroom 2 will be about how to complete the story deck, and classroom 3 will be about how to present it. So they'll build on each other after each content session. And like I've said, these classroom sessions are smaller. It'll be half of the cohort so that you can really actually get some of the work done on the calls as opposed to all of it being homework, if that makes sense. Content. What is the content for phase 1? So session 1, we've titled How the Land Organizes Us, Preparing for Money to Flow, because we realize it's going to be flowing pretty quickly, pretty soon. So classroom 1 is about navigating right relationship, sources of healing and harm in our landscapes. Classroom 2 is about representation, who needs a seat at the table. And classroom 3 is about planning for money disbursement. And so all of these semi-topics are going to be about how do we hold our core principles of letting the land lead, our core principles of relationality and trust building, as we plan for money to flow into that space. Session 2 is around how we communicate our vision and our impact, so multi-capital and story-based reporting. Oh, I just went through this on the other slides, sorry. Oh, you've heard me talk about that. We'll gather inputs on what we want to show in our story decks. We will then introduce a deck template and supporting process guides, and then that would become the homework for the 2-week end of the year break. And then classroom 3 is our preparation for the first dry run chance to present your story deck. And session 3 is about going public. It's about preparing for the landscape showcase, which will be happening in the first week of February and is now on the calendar. Classroom 1 is about the nitty-gritty invitations. Who do you want to showcase your work to? Regenerate Cascadia will have already invited funders and some of our partners and stakeholders, but we obviously want landscape groups to be having their own personal invitation list for who they want to bring into the room at this point. What is the copy on that invitation email, and what is your distribution process to make sure you get people in the room? Classroom 2 is chance to prepare. The Department of Bioregion is going to be launching a new template, which is an annual face-to-face dinner. That's happening at the end of the first week of January. That's a great opportunity for a bit of a dry run test of your story deck presentation and how that feels in a live room. And then Classroom 3 is presentation preparation for our landscape showcase event, which is online, will happen in 2 sessions, where we'll feature 4 to 5 landscape groups in each session. There'll be a chance for dialogue and Q&A between you and funders and other audience members. And something we're hoping for here, we think is some low-hanging fruit, is can we get a bit of a donation flurry as a result of the landscape showcase event? Are there some donors in your area that you know an event like that could really just kick them over into becoming a donor? Anything to add, Claire and Brandon, on content?
I think
Might
those.
just add, oh, go ahead, Claire.
No, I was just going to say it looks good. We'll get into more in detail later.
Brandon?
Yeah, and I think this is really nice to touch on the story deck. And then the other part of this is that Taya will be compiling a written component for our actual grant application as well. And so we have these 2 different kind of elements that we're really focusing on in phase 1, which is really geared towards visualizing the work and visualizing the people who are already in the landscapes holding the relationships.
So there's 2 reasons for that. One, we want to present this work as a bioregional, this is a bioregional story. You know, it's not just landscape groups. It's the sum of the parts equals more than the whole equals more than the sum of the parts. But also we're doing this, traditionally you would do this at the end of a cultivator or an accelerator or an incubator. We think it's really important to do it at the beginning. And then at the end, of course, we have another opportunity to go public to show the extent of the journey we've been on.
Yeah, I was just going to, actually, I will just jump in here just to say, even in the breakout room, we were talking about the incredible potential of the different groups coming together in the landscape and the work that they're doing. And so you've got a unique window in on some of that work and probably don't know half of what they're actually doing. So to be able to take a snapshot of what is going on in your particular landscape and then to pull it together with the 9 other landscapes, there's no way that you wouldn't get excited about the work that's happening when you start hearing about it. And that we think is actually a really powerful way of actually inviting funders in to say, come and be part of this amazing opportunity. So it's a powerful way of kicking off the work that we're about to start together.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Brandon. So funding and outputs for phase 1. Funding. Each landscape group will receive between $1,500 and $3,000 US to support their story deck and showcase efforts that you're putting in. The reason that figure is unknown is because it's dependent on outcomes of the localism fund that we've applied for. The minimum is $1,500. We have that already budgeted, but it could be higher. Brandon, did you want to say anything on the localism fund? No, you're good? All right. But what's important to know is the same amount for each group. It's not like some groups will get 1,500 and some groups will get 3,000. We'll all get the same amount.
I guess I would just add that the numbers that we're giving are all minimums, and that we will always be working in the background to try to increase those numbers and to flow more. So whenever possible, we will be trying to make sure that groups get as much as as much as possible for phase 1, for the bioregional mapping, and then especially for the flow funding sandboxes. And then we also hope that you all are working on your own to try to raise as much as you can and use this as an excuse and leverage these relationships and this process and these really amazing people in this room to just maximize everything that we're doing.
Thanks, Brandon. So that's the funding for phase 1. Output 1 is the initial landscape group story deck. And I say initial because it's a starting point. It's not supposed to encompass everything. It's not going to be arduous. in terms of of a task. So it's a collaboratively produced template. We will produce that template together. And the story decks are our initial way to make our work and LHC pilot visible to funders. It's telling the story of now of your landscape group, not the story of where you're going to be going. Just don't get overwhelmed is my main point. And it really serves as a starting point and to further our practice and to get used to how we communicate multi-capital value and how we communicate our impact through story-based reporting, because that is a fundamental systemic change from an economic perspective. And as Brandon just said, those story decks, while they'll be standalone and there'll be a basis for your presentation, live presentation with Q&A in the showcase, they will also be aggregated and presented inside our next funding application to Novo, which is really exciting because they're going to see how busy we've been and how busy all of you have been and how much we're able to do and be together. And finally, output 2 is the landscape group presentations of the story deck at 2 separate events. So we have event 1, which is the annual dinner, which is new. There'll be more information coming on that soon. This is a great chance for a dry run of presenting your landscape group at its current stage and practicing using your story deck as the foundation. Then you'll have 2 more classroom sessions to refine that. And event 2 is the landscape showcase event, which is online. A funder-facing event to bring funders into your LHC pilot journey, a great chance to publicize your landscape group to potential donors in your landscapes. So we are coming down the home stretch. This is my signal to stop sharing my screen. I want to let you, so what you're looking at now is the Regenerate Cascadia landscape groups and LHC program schedule. This exists inside of Mighty Network, but I have just, oops, I didn't mean to stop. Give me a second. Oh no, sorry. I have updated that calendar recently and just want to show that to you momentarily. So I won't go into detail, but just so that you can see where to find it. Screen share. We'll do whole screen now. So as you can see, for those of you that have been in the Mighty Network space for a while, you'll be familiar hopefully with November and December. We have now added January and the first week of February so that you can see phase 1 in its entirety. There's a legend here at the top. So things in green represent landscape hub cultivator programming. Things in orange represent landscape group programming, which is also part of your resource kit. So office hours and monthly community calls. The blue area, which will be populating quite soon, is the suggested activities that you'll be working on in regard to your classroom and session content experiences in the LHC, so that you can see at a glance what it is you're supposed to be focusing on this week. And finally, purple equals holiday time or no programming. So we've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, and then February off for us to do our evaluation and our iteration and just have a bit of a rest as we prepare for phase 2. So this will be updated and posted in Mighty Networks shortly. And while I'm sharing my screen, I'll just do a very quick orientation of Mighty Networks for those folks that have just joined recently, nothing massive. I'll just walk through what we have on the left side panel. So obviously your global feed is a place where at a glance you can see everything. Events is where you can see all events happening. This includes group events, landscape group events, hub cultivator events. Members, not particularly helpful, but we'll see how that could improve. And then you have our collections. So home is where people are starting off, introducing themselves. There's a checklist in there for things to do just to get yourself up and running with the space. RC announcements is where we share Regenerate Cascadia level announcements, particularly some of the broader fundraising work that we're doing. And a community lounge, this is really designed to be a social place or a place where topic-based discussions or inquiries might start to happen, because there are feeds in all of the other spaces where you can direct programmatic or specific questions or comments. So Bioregen program is our next collection. This has our landscape groups program, which the Landscape Hub Cultivator, is part of. This has our updates and discussion feed. separate calendar of events for the landscape groups. So this is where you can RSVP for office hours. So for new groups that have just come on board, these are great. You can just RSVP and come along, and you've got the landscapes team there to help you with any of the nitty-gritty elements. Program description for those that, oh, there it is. There's the program description with Claire's beautiful artwork, which is peppered throughout the Mighty Network platform. And then all recordings for sessions will be, community calls, etc., will all be featured here. The Landscape Hub Cultivator. So whenever anything is bolded like this, it means there's been a fresh update since the last time you checked. Inside Landscape Hub Cultivator, obviously we're streaming this event live. It's the same format. So updates and discussions, calendar events, program descriptions, and recordings and slides. And so this section, recordings and slides, is where you'll find the slides from today's presentation. And then this is so exciting because just like a few days ago, we had 5 landscape groups and now we have 9, but there is a step that you need to take to make sure that you can see every group space. And that is just to click on the landscape groups collection at the top. And that will show you if there are any, you'll have like green buttons that says join Duwamish River Valley, join Greater Victoria. And once you click the green button, then it will show up in your side panel. So for now, our group spaces are open to all of us because this is a closed network. We're going through the LHC together. We actually want to be able to see what groups are doing, what they're talking about, what they're learning. In the future, probably around phase 2, we'll look at whether Mighty Network can support the public interfacing, and we'll talk about that at that time. And then, oh, I thought that was hidden. So very important, support, contact us. This is really the place. So for RC website tech support, log any of your issues here. We've got a lot more coverage here on Mighty Network, which means I'll see it and I'll forward it on to our website team and we'll get you a response very quickly. And then for Mighty Network tech support or just general onboarding questions, you'll pop this up here. If a question is resolved and it doesn't need to be left for live learning, we will delete it, but otherwise we'll leave questions and comments for live learning. And I think that brings us to time for questions and dialogue, and it does. Fantastic. So there's a lot going on in the chat. Claire and Brandon, I might let one of you field, are there specific questions in the chat we should answer first, or should we just go to popcorn style? I'm not sure, I haven't had a chance to view it.
Yeah, I see Claire has got her hand up and there are some questions that we can pull out of the chat.
Okay, great.
So Claire,
away.
go ahead.
So I know all of us are at different places in the process. We have been working on designing a collaboration amongst all of our partners for making this story deck. And now you're telling us this whole other process. I'm trying to figure out how to sync those two processes because people were feeling like, oh, where is there the template and, you know, the something that explains, like, we don't have an RFP to respond to kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so how would you suggest we manage that?
Oh, well, first of all, just yay, because you're ahead of us and that's amazing. And that's, you know, for us, just getting the Mighty Network platform up, it seems like a simple thing, but it's actually hugely important because now we have a many-to-many communication vehicle, which means we have decentralized leadership. We have groups at different levels. We've got groups with different focuses. It doesn't need to come from the LHC delivery team. It's going to be coming from all of us. So Claire, I would say don't stress, like if you want to continue with the process that you're doing, if it's rewarding and helpful, it means that in that classroom, you're going to have quite a lot to offer because you've already started on the work. And in terms of providing a broader guideline, you know, we'll get to that, but we're not there yet. Claire.
Yeah, I'm going to just say one of the things that, so, you know, we're a really small team and we are really stretched. And so there is a kind of needing to, like, there's only so much that we can stretch. And if we overstretch towards trying to accommodate some of you who are doing amazing things, we just, it'll just mean that we can't do what we need to do to support everyone. And one of the things we've tried to do to streamline and to support people along the way is the classroom sessions that Taya was actually speaking to, because there are important considerations just in terms of what, one of the goals, as Taya was talking about, was the pattern interruption. And how do we sort of really surface what those patterns are, if unless we're starting to bring them up in a conversation. And so there's some things that become tripping points that you might be just fine and you might be able to just carry on doing what you're doing. But there might be important things that as we're rolling out the process and as we're looking at trying to surface them, that might be really helpful. So I think that's the part where we're also talking about the minimum viable process, the trust building, the slowing down, so that we're just going at a pace that feels like we can do it, but we're also covering those steps that if we miss them, we could actually continue repeating the existing patterns, and it's tricky. So I know that's not a question. So we can have more conversation as well, because we'd love to work. I mean, you guys have been doing amazing stuff with coordinating with people. And we'd like to try and figure out how we can sync up with the work you've already been doing. But that's a more general comment about how we're hoping to work with you and the groups.
So what I'm hearing is that we should just do our own thing and we'll sync it in when we have the conversations as it goes on.
I think what we're saying is don't stall because of us. We don't want to get in the way of your self-organization.
That's really, that was really a question. Thank you.
Yeah, don't stall. If you want to stall, if you want to pause and wait, you can. But if the energy is there, do your thing.
Yeah. And part of what I'll just say is, I mean, this is day one, right? So this is our first launch event, and we're just gathering. And I think for many people, so different groups are at different stages. And so what's really nice is that we can share that learning. But I think part of this too is then learning to slow down together, and that actually to fold all that in. But so go at your own pace that works for you, but then also realize that, in terms of a program, having everything prepared, for day one, that's part of the process now, is that we get to work together over the next couple months to actually figure out what even is a story deck, what needs to be told. And so what's exciting is you're light years ahead, and we're looking forward to all of the learning and sharing you'll have.
Well, one learning
You'll
I
get to
have
guide
from
us.
having written lots of grants is there's a deadline. And if you're going, we have to go slow, and it's like, oh, the deadline is January 10th, and it's like November, middle of November. It's like,
And I think
there's a little contradiction.
You are so right.
No, I think that speaks to a paradoxical tension that we will be holding throughout, which is how do we meet short-term funding cycles and deadlines whilst challenging that ineffective model by showing that it actually, the time it takes to circle back, to continue to strengthen belonging, to make sure moments of tension or friction or rupture don't end up in exile, but end up in extra strengthening of our collective, all that stuff. But anyway, David, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick one here. And thank you for all of this. In some of the original documentation, there was a requirement, an expectation that our landscape groups would develop a why regenerate would be, why regenerate whatever Whatcom, and that the answer to that question would then be integrated into the Novo grants that you guys were putting together at the end of the year. Is that still something you're looking for? And I've noticed there seems to be an absence of that output in your existing presentation.
Right. Hey, do you want to? Well, I would just answer by saying, no, it's very much still included. And actually, so part of that, right? So I think we talked about the story deck, but the other part will be a written component that'll actually be included in that grant application. And so Taya will actually be working to compile that, as well as create a broader narrative for Regenerate Cascadia, but then every landscape will have their own part of it. And a big part of this is visualizing the incredible networks and weavers that you all are, the networks that you hold, and then helping use that as a case study for why we're working in this way.
And so that the story deck, Brandon, will complement the why. And it really, the story deck, as I see it, is really the story of how we've built the connections and the relationships within this initial phrase. That's what we want to have out there.
I we don't know, like, because this is why we try to say what it is and what it isn't, because we could certainly go, right, let's make the story decks this. And we think that's actually a lost opportunity because it's three brains. We want to give landscape group stewards the opportunity to have a session on multi-capital, have a session on story-based reporting, think about what do you want to see in a story deck for now? Is it the story of how you came together? Does it include some history or some legacy? If you're a new group, is it about vision? How do you capture the call to action that each of you felt from your landscapes? There's many things it could be, and we're not going to lock it down. We're actually going to co-create that together.
Yeah.
And while for some of us that's frustrating, we think ultimately it's going to be much richer.
Yeah, I just want to also say, remember, we won't have done the bi-regional mapping yet. This is like just the very starting place, so that we don't have that shared context that we've developed together. This is just kind of like the very beginning of who are we going to be. We're looking at pulling into that process. And this is going to be a process that will have to just have one cycle after another where we're adding to it. So it's like, yeah, not trying to do everything. It's just trying to kind of figure out how do we have enough diversity with the people that we're working with that are ready to work with us.
And I'll just add, like, mainstream systems would want to call it a pitch deck, or they would want to call it a baseline. We're really purposefully not calling it those things. It's a story of now. It's a snapshot, because we're trying to get away from that way of thinking about outputs and get something more organic and landscape and human based. So it's actually a rich topic of discussion. It's great that it's coming up now. Anna, you've had your hand up for some time, and
many questions in the chat. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I feel like I kept derailing, and I was like, wait, you said to drop them in the chat and we get to them at the end. I didn't mean to derail anything. So I feel like we're in a bit of like a kind of catch-22 space with some of the work we're doing in the South Willamette, where at least like in our kind of more locally focused portfolio, we have a group of organizations that have already been collaborating together for a long time and like are ready to take it the next step, like have kind of a shared vision for where this is going to go, have multiple projects under each organization, plus dozens of partners in the area. Like it's sort of ready to just be like activated. And we're struggling a little bit, both kind of in South Willamette and then like me representing Center for Rural Livelihoods, which is one of those organizations, of going to our partners and telling them like, hey, sign up for this thing, like join us in this emergent process, because everyone's bogged down with the work, and they're like, well, I don't have time to join the Landscape Hub Cultivator. Like, I don't have time to like put together a deck or like have all of these meetings, like unless there's a there, and to be frank, and I say this with so much respect for what y'all are doing, like $3,000 is not a there for these organizations, right? Like, and that's just real for like a lot of people. And I totally know that y'all are thinking of this. So it's just something that like we've been struggling with in terms of like, what kind of vision can we even articulate? And how do we like in good faith include our partners in something that we don't know if this vision will ever come to fruition? Like, we don't know what's there for it. And then like, should we be talking in terms of like what we can do with an extra staff member for each organization? Should we be talking with what we can do if each organization can buy a building and like not be indebted in rent, and be buying land and be launching projects, launching new organizations, like we just don't know enough specifics about what we're talking about here to be able to have effective conversations with our partners about coming into like a shared vision and shared portfolio. So I know that many things are still emergent. And it's not so much that I'm seeking immediate clarity on those questions now, but more like voicing that as like a need from the community of like, we don't know how to take this further until we know more from y'all about what's kind of coming down the pipeline.
Anna, I think you've done a great job of naming a great situation, a great problem to have. Right?
Good.
It's a great problem to have, and it could be seen as a problem in this moment. And I'm sure Brandon and Claire will have more to feed in, but I would just say that sounds totally appropriate for where we are right now. And I think I said at one point, the LHC, especially the first two phases, the first 6 months, is a moment of actually, I hate to say it, but becoming a bit more exclusive, tightening in, and becoming a dedicated online learning community to work through some foundational processes that will lead us to a point of more clarity and foundational strength in order to have a sense of how we want to be interacting with the larger whole. This is one of the areas where we intentionally want to be slowing down because it is so easy to be spread so wide. And we're asking a very particular learning journey of you in the next 6 months and beyond. And we recognize that's going to take time and energy. And so we'll be talking about how to use these small amounts of funds as we talk about how to increase them. It might be that they go simply to the participating landscape group stewards for your time and energy. We don't know yet. That's not a decision for us to make on your behalf.
Yeah. I can also see we're getting towards 8:30. The thing I would love to just say is that we have put the timelines together. I think we can have, if you come to the office hours or we have further conversations about it, that's certainly an option. But I think you're understanding what we're able to offer and then working with what you already are doing is, so each landscape is going to have their needs met in different ways. And yeah, I saw April had her hand up. Did you want to ask something?
I actually just wanted to validate what you guys are doing. I've been in some regenerosity meetings recently, and they have had different cultivators like this, and they've paid participants to come in and start the program from scratch. The workshop is to start the program from scratch. And so if you can only imagine, coming in and not even having this much of a framework. So for all of you that are like grappling for those answers, I totally understand. And you're right, because we've been trained to need to have those questions answered to get to the next step. But because we are disrupting the systems, we're here together to do that work, and just like come into that with curiosity, and come into it with gratitude for the space that's being held, and that there is actually money to be allocated, and try and reset our nervous systems together in this. And that's all I had to say, just to give you a little bit of validation. And thank you so much for the space.
You, April.
April.
You always feel like we're behind the 8 ball, getting structure and things to you.
It's going to be a journey.
What's really nice too is I think that's part of it, right? Is getting comfortable with that we don't know the answers going in. So I think something that we really like is that we learned that it's really important to lead with questions, not answers, not assumptions. And so we'll be asking a lot of questions and then working together to really look at that. And just very excited to do it with such a wonderful group of people.
And just in terms of next steps, I've got a slide, but I don't feel like going to it. The next steps are to go ahead and RSVP for session 1 this Friday at 10:30 a.m. and get that into your calendar, or at least make sure amongst your crew that one of you is attending that event and that you can, look at the slides afterwards. And then pay attention. There'll be a series of updates and posts in the next 48 hours about getting our AM and PM cohorts sorted out, and we'll be uploading the rest of the calendar of events. And so basically just get yourself scheduled. As soon as the classroom cohorts, either morning and evening, have been established by the end of this week, then we'll open up the RSVP function inside Mighty Network so you can get those onto your calendar.
I think just also to address a point that Anna had brought up, that is not going to be unique to South Willamette Valley. That is the same, and that's part of this exciting process of having 9 landscape groups together. Is people who are doing the work are busy doing the work, and that they're not resourced, they're not supported. And so a big part of this is how can we be growing this interstitial capacity that really supports the weaving and support between groups. And so, and the fact that we're never going to have enough resourcing. And so how do we make the most of it to really lead us to these next steps that see people supported? Yeah, so I also wanted to just name that, like, don't feel bad. We understand that we're busy, that everybody's busy. We don't want this to be an additional stress to the work that people are already doing. So you're never gonna, it's not like a punitive thing of like, if you can't make it, we're not gonna be upset. We're not gonna be, but try to work with your landscape groups. So the idea is that between your landscape groups and your stewards, we hope that a couple members can attend or join, a session, so that there's always someone there holding that, and then sharing the learning from your actual landscape with the other landscape stewards present too. So that's a big part of it. But we're never going to get on you if you're like, oh no, I can't, make a Friday at 10 a.m. or something. That's okay, and we understand. And so this is a working, living laboratory that we're going to be doing together.
And to build on that, like, we're a bioregional organizing team, and we have our own experience of going, oh, we're not ready yet. We have to just accept that we didn't make it. Cool. Okay, let's just go back to MVP and rejig. And so if we get to Story Deck Land and things are getting crazy, or a landscape showcase event seems too full, we will find ways to adapt. Because the fact is, it takes the time it takes. That's reality, and we don't want to be in resistance to that. We want to be able to be in a naturalness as human beings. So, and so what we'll be doing, we'll download the chat. We'll make sure that any questions in there or comments that weren't really resolved or responded to, we'll include in the update with the session slides and the recording. Yeah, and that's it. That's all from me. Thank you, everyone. Claire, Brandon, any last words?
Yeah, I want to just say a huge shout out to Taya. Thank you so much for taking on the presentation part. You're doing amazing.
You're most welcome. It was really fun to start with a massive technical glitch. Right, thanks for bearing with that.
Lovely
So
to
great
see all of you. Yeah.
to bring faces to names, and don't be a stranger in Mighty Network. That's our space now to really have cross communication and pollination. And we hope to see as many of you as we can on Friday. I won't be there because it's 5:30 in the morning, but Claire and Brandon will be leading you through our first content session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming out, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Good to see everyone.
Too. Thank you.